Our forum is part of this I Promise campaign, and this is our physicians' initiative, what we do with regard to our patients. When we started meeting with Dr. Southwick and we got in contact with a bunch of people, we wanted to kind of gather and explore what we can do. One of the things that Dr. George Carnassos noted is when we walk into a patient room, quite often, we simply don't take the time to introduce who we are. Our first speaker is going to be Lisa Auerbach, a good friend of mine, and she's going to talk about her experiences as a patient.
I never ever would have thought I would have been in this position. Some of the things I've learned was I didn't really know how it all worked. I didn't know how to coordinate the care, who talked to who, how. I've come now to getting my medical records and getting my disc, and because I have to kind of manage my specialist and kind of make sure everybody knows what's going on. Kind of a very unofficial survey of patients when we started meeting with this group. And the main thing was patients said they need their doctors to listen, and that really was the top of the list. They oftentimes, we don't know what you know. I didn't know how many of you really knew what EDS is or what it was about. So we come in sometimes thinking you guys have the answers, and you all know what we need. And I'm come to find out that there's a lot of things that aren't answered, and we need your help. Patients want you to focus, and they want your respect, and they want you to share your knowledge and experience. It's taken a while for me to get to the comfort zone and to understand enough to stand up for myself.
Dr. Emergency Department Doctor Rich Petrick, my colleague, is going to tell his story about his experience.
Tell you the story about, my story of being a patient and how it really gave life to patient-centered care. So when I saw the I Promise campaign, I was actually 1 year ago in Thanksgiving. It was Thanksgiving. I was ill. I'd been to the hospital once because I had a high fever and chills. I had a positive flu swab. I was admitted, rehydrated, discharged. I came back a day later, a little bit worse, a little bit more tender. CAT scan showed that I had a perforated appendicitis, and they took really good care of me. And I had a good experience as being a patient. But during that time, I realized some of the tiny things that occurred, some of the small, tiny things that occurred that made my patient experience not so good, or forced me to think about, what I would do differently if I were in the shoes of the physician, or what I would do differently when I'm looking at a patient. So I didn't even know about the I Promise campaign, but as soon as I heard of it, I said to myself, I promise to give ice chips. And I said, the day after, you feel like you've never felt before. I've never felt that type of pain. And so rolling over to get my ice chips was so difficult. And I had this wonderful nurse, Jen. She was in the IMC, and she came in and immediately recognized that things were too far out of my reach, and she pushed the table over and put an ice chip in my mouth. And I was like, that was like the best thing I've ever felt. Really, it's just the small words, it's the small deeds, it's one of your surgeons coming in, sitting down, giving you your phone number, texting you that day, or clearly, when rounding, stopping in and saying, "Hey, Rich," or "Hey, Mr. Petrick." Not that I require that, but just stopping in and saying hello, and one small word or one small deed was really what made me sort of forget about some of the difficulties of my plight.
We need to kind of do our part to be aware of the whole system around us and not just our direct interaction with the patient. We're so protocol driven in medicine, and I think there's a very good reason for that, but there are so many things that are just common sense that don't get a protocol. And I always joke around that I think that we're very smart people, but the smarter we are, the less common sense we have. And I think that we lose sight of some of these really practical things sometimes. Yes?
I just had a comment about the multifactorial aspects of patient satisfaction. I think part of the reason why I want to spread the word of I Promise or these small things is I think it's infectious. I think, you know, once we start doing something or being examples within our department, and I'm by no means an example, but if we start being examples, you know, techs take the lead of that, or, you know, nurses take the lead of that, or other people that work around you, ancillary staff, residents, take the lead from your example of those things. And so we kind of build on a foundation of, you know, the physician, you know, being a certain way with patients, you know, trying to increase satisfaction.
Whose son turned out he had appendicitis, he was not experiencing much pain because he has a very high tolerance to pain. So she took him to the pediatrician. No, there's no way he can have appendicitis because he doesn't have pain. She said, I know, but he has a high level of pain. She knew her child. She didn't have a lot of Google information. She knew her child, and he did have appendicitis.
Yeah.
But he was not experiencing what the physician would say the typical symptoms of having appendicitis. And so I think there's also physicians listening to the patient and what they know about themselves, because each person is
Fix it, but I think that's so if we're reliable and we're thorough and we're understanding, then we can get somewhere. And if we're not, then it's hopeless. From 8 East, that the rest of us can apply. How can we do that? And I think that's where we can learn from.
Share this last thought, and I think it summarizes a lot of what's been said today. One of my favorite people is Mother Teresa. I think she's a favorite of many. I liked one saying she popularized, and she says, "We can do no great things. We can only do little things with great love."
That's the next meeting.
Well, we're hoping, this was the first of a series of forums we're going to have. Our next forum is going to be doctor-nurse communication. Our third forum will be doctor-doctor communication, probably the most difficult. And I completely concur. One of the problems we have is we are all focused on the facts, on biomedical science. That's important. But we have not focused on interpersonal skills, on teamwork, on understanding systems. And these are all things that we need to learn and we need to discuss as a group. And that's what we want to do in the I Promise Physician campaign. So thank you all for coming. This has been fantastic.